I was standing in the courthouse hallway when my phone buzzed. The notification from my bank made me pause mid-step. Another wire transfer had just gone through from the account linked to the house. $150,000. The house I had just finished paying off 3 days ago. The house that was supposed to be mine. The house my mother had just given to my younger brother Chad as a graduation gift without telling me. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking, watching my entire sacrifice crumble in real time. They weren't just stealing my house. They were using the equity I had built, the value I had created, with $750,000 of my own money to fund their lavish lifestyle. And in that moment, standing in that cold marble hallway with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, I knew exactly what I had to do. But before we get into that, if you want to hear how this story ends, and you're enjoying this journey of justice, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation. Your support means everything, and trust me, you're going to want to stick around for how this plays out. Let me take you back to the beginning because you need to understand how I got here. My name is Anya Vance, and for the past 8 years I had been the invisible support system holding my family together. When I was 22, fresh out of college with a finance degree and a decent entry-level job at an investment firm, my parents sat me down for what they called a family meeting. My father, Robert, looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped in a way I had never seen before. My mother, Veronica, had that tight smile she always wore when she was about to ask for something she knew was unreasonable. They were drowning in debt. The beautiful 2-story house in the affluent suburbs of New Jersey, the one they had bought to impress the neighbours and maintain their image of success, was bleeding them dry. The mortgage was crushing them, and they were 3 months behind on payments. Foreclosure was a real possibility. My younger brother Chad was still in high school dreaming of an Ivy League education, and they couldn't bear the thought of moving to a smaller place, of admitting failure to their social circle, of shattering the perfect family image they had cultivated. I should have seen the red flags then. I should have noticed how my mother's eyes slid past me when she talked about family sacrifice, how my father couldn't quite meet my gaze. But I was young, idealistic, and desperate for their approval. For my entire childhood, I had been the responsible one, the one who studied hard, who never caused problems, who made straight A's while Chad coasted through with C's and got praised for his charm. I thought this was my chance to finally be the hero, to be the one they talked about with pride at dinner parties. So I agreed. I moved back home to save on rent, and I started sending them money every month. At first it was just $500 to help with the mortgage, then it became $1,000, then $1,500. I picked up a second job on weekends doing freelance financial consulting. I stopped going out with friends. I wore the same clothes for years. I drove a beat-up Honda Civic that was older than some of my co-workers' children, while my colleagues showed up in new Audis and BMWs. Meanwhile, Chad cruised through his senior year of high school without a care in the world. He went to prom in a rented tuxedo that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. He took his girlfriend on weekend trips to the beach. When he graduated and decided he wanted to go to a state school instead of community college, I was the one who quietly paid for his first semester so my parents wouldn't have to take out more loans. The years blurred together. I got promoted at work, and instead of celebrating, I increased my monthly payments to my parents. By the time I was 27, I was sending them $4,000 a month. $4,000 that could have been my down payment on my own place, my own future, my own life. But every time I thought about reducing the amount, my mother would call with another crisis. The roof needed repairs, the property taxes had gone up, the HOA fees were increasing. And every conversation ended the same way, with her sighing deeply and saying how grateful they were to have one child they could count on. The implication was always clear. Chad was the golden child, the one who made them laugh, who was charming and social and popular. I was the workhorse, valuable only for what I could provide. But I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that once the house was paid off, once they were stable, I could start living my own life. 2 months ago, I made the decision that would change everything. I had been promoted to senior analyst, and with my bonus and savings, I finally had enough to make one massive payment and clear the remaining mortgage balance. $750,000. It was every penny I had saved, every sacrifice I had made, every dream I had deferred. But I convinced myself it was worth it. Once the house was paid off, my parents would be free. And more importantly, I would be free. Free from the monthly burden, free from the guilt-free, to finally start my own life at 29 years old. I remember the day I made the transfer. It was a Tuesday morning in early October. The leaves were just starting to turn, and there was that crisp feeling in the air that made everything seem possible. I sat at my desk at work, logged into my bank account, and clicked the button. $750,000 gone in an instant. But I felt lighter than I had in years. I called my mother to tell her the good news. She didn't answer. That should have been my first clue. I left a voicemail, trying to keep my voice steady, telling her that the final payment had gone through, that the house was finally free and clear, that we could all breathe easier now. She called me back 3 hours later, and her voice was strangely flat when she said they had received it and thanked me. No emotion, no celebration, just a quick thank you, and then she had to go because she was planning something special. I assumed it was a surprise party or a family dinner to celebrate. I was wrong. The next Friday I decided to drive over to the house after work. I hadn't been there in a few weeks and I wanted to see my parents, to bask in the relief of finally being done with this chapter. Maybe we could finally have a normal relationship now, one not defined by financial transactions and guilt. As I pulled up to the familiar tree-lined street, I noticed there were cars in the driveway, more cars than usual. And there was someone on the front porch. It was Chad, my 23-year-old brother who had graduated from college 6 months ago and had been living with my parents while he figured out what to do with his life. He was painting the front door a deep navy blue, replacing the faded red that had been there for years. He was wearing expensive-looking clothes, designer jeans, and a polo shirt that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill. When he saw me pull up, he barely glanced over, just kept painting with this satisfied smile on his face. I got out of my car confused. Why was he painting the door? Why did he look so pleased with himself? I walked up the driveway, my heels clicking on the concrete, and called out to him. "Mum asked you to clean the place up before you move out," I said, trying to keep my voice light. He didn't answer. He just kept painting, that smug smile growing wider. The front door opened and my mother stepped out. Veronica Sterling had always been an imposing woman, tall and angular with perfectly styled hair and an expression that could cut glass. But today there was something different in her eyes, something cold and final. She was holding a small box, a jewellery box I thought at first, and my stomach did a little flip. Maybe this was it, the acknowledgement I had been waiting for, some token of appreciation for everything I had done. She walked down the porch steps, her heels clicking in perfect rhythm, and stopped in front of me. She didn't smile, she didn't invite me in, she just held out the box. I took it, my hands trembling slightly. When I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. Inside was my old house key, the one I had carried for 8 years, the one I had used countless times to let myself in when I came to visit or to drop off checks. But it wasn't whole anymore. It had been broken in half, snapped clean through the middle. The 2 pieces lay there in the velvet interior, a deliberate destruction of something that had once represented my place in this family. I looked up at my mother, waiting for an explanation, waiting for this to make sense. Her face was impassive, almost bored. "This house is a graduation gift for Chad," she said, her voice matter-of-fact, like she was discussing the weather. "Thank you for the final payment, Ace." Her use of my nickname, the one she had given me years ago, calling me the ace of the family, the one who always came through, felt like acid in my ears. "But we don't need you to be the family ace anymore. You don't need to save us. You can go now." She said it so casually, so dismissively, like I was a delivery person who had dropped off a package and was no longer needed. I stood there, the broken key in my hands, trying to process what was happening. Behind her, Chad had stopped painting and was watching us, that smug smile now a full grin. I felt something crack inside me. Not break, not yet, just crack like ice forming on a pond. I looked at the house I had poured my entire adult life into saving. I looked at my brother who had contributed nothing but was somehow being rewarded with everything. I looked at my mother, This woman who had guilt-tripped me for years, who had made me feel responsible for their mistakes, their choices, their image. And then she delivered the final blow. "Oh, and you're not invited to the housewarming party tomorrow," she added, almost as an afterthought. She turned to go back inside, then paused and glanced back at me over her shoulder with a cruel little smile. "We already sent out invitations to all the family and neighbours. We told everyone about Chad's beautiful graduation gift. It would be awkward to have you there." The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded deafening in the afternoon air. I stood there in the driveway holding a box with my broken key, while my brother went back to painting the door of the house I had bought. Cars drove past on the quiet suburban street. A neighbour was mowing their lawn. Somewhere a dog barked. The world kept turning completely indifferent to the fact that mine had just shattered. I got back in my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove away, not really seeing the road operating on autopilot. I made it 3 blocks before I had to pull over because I couldn't see through my tears. I sat there in my beat-up Honda Civic in a grocery store parking lot, and I cried. I cried for the 8 years I had lost. I cried for the life I could have had. I cried for the relationships I had neglected because I was always working extra hours to send more money home. I cried for my own naivety for believing that sacrifice and loyalty meant something to these people. But somewhere in the middle of that breakdown, something shifted. The grief began to crystallize into something harder, sharper. Rage. Pure, cold, focused rage. And with it came clarity. They had played me, they had used me, they had taken everything I had given them and tossed me aside the moment they didn't need me anymore. And they thought they could just get away with it because I had always been the nice one, the responsible one, the one who never made waves. They were wrong. I dried my tears, pulled out my phone and made a call to someone I should have called months ago. My uncle Mark Vance, my father's younger brother. Mark and my parents had been estranged for years after some family drama I never fully understood. But Mark was a corporate lawyer, successful and sharp, and he had always been kind to me at the few family gatherings he attended before the rift. When he answered, I told him everything. Every payment, every sacrifice, every manipulation. And then I told him about the broken key and the graduation gift. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Anya," he said finally, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Do you have documentation of all those payments?" I did. Every bank transfer, every receipt, every email confirming payment. 8 years of meticulous records, because that's who I was organised and responsible to a fault. "Good. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? There's something I need to show you, something I set up years ago when I saw what your parents were becoming. I never told you because I hoped you'd never need it. I was wrong." The next morning I met Uncle Mark at his office, a sleek high-rise in Manhattan, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He was waiting for me with a folder of documents and a woman he introduced as Laura Chen, one of the best real estate and contract attorneys in the state. What they told me changed everything. Years ago, when Mark had seen how my parents were starting to lean on me financially, he had quietly established something called a protective trust. It was a legal instrument designed to protect family members who contributed to property from being exploited. He had structured it so that any substantial financial contributions I made to the house would give me a legal claim to the property. It wasn't public record, it wasn't something my parents knew about, but it was legitimate and ironclad. If I could prove I had made substantial contributions, and that those contributions were made with the expectation of shared ownership or return, I had a case. And I had 8 years of bank records proving exactly that. But that wasn't all. Laura pulled out another document and my hands started shaking again. It was a credit report for the property pulled just that morning. My parents, Robert and Veronica Sterling, had taken out a home equity line of credit just 2 days after I made the final mortgage payment, $150,000. They had used the equity I had created, the value I had added to that house with my money to borrow even more money. And I knew exactly what they had done with it. The expensive repainting job, the party they were planning. And according to a follow-up from my cousin Tiana Sterling, who worked at the lending bank, and who had always been kind to me, there was more. Chad had been spotted at a Mercedes dealership driving away in a brand new C-Class that cost $70,000. a graduation present from Mum and Dad paid for with money borrowed against my sacrifice. They hadn't just stolen my contribution to the house, they had leveraged it to fund their continued lifestyle of appearances and favouritism. They had taken my life savings and turned it into party supplies and a luxury car for the golden child who had never worked a day in his life for that family. Laura leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. "Anya," she said, "we can stop this. We can file an emergency motion for a temporary writ of possession based on the protective trust and the fraudulent transfer of equity. With the HELOC, they've created a new debt on property that you have a legal claim to. We can argue they've acted in bad faith and that the property needs to be placed under your control until this is resolved in court." "How fast can we move?" I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat and cold. "If we file today and the judge is sympathetic, we could have a decision by Monday. That's in 72 hours. "Do it," I said. "Do all of it." Laura smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who enjoyed taking down people who thought they were untouchable. "Oh, we will. And Anya, we're also going to make sure they can't sell, transfer, or further mortgage this property. We'll file a lease pendens, a notice of pending litigation which will cloud the title. No one will touch that house until this is resolved in your favour." The next 3 days were a blur of legal documents and strategy sessions. Laura was relentless, and Uncle Mark was covering the legal fees, telling me it was worth every penny to watch my parents face consequences for once in their lives. The emergency hearing was set for Monday morning, but Laura was already preparing for the coup de grace. Saturday was the housewarming party. The big celebration where my parents would show off the house I had bought and pretend they had done it all themselves. Where Chad would parade around in his new Mercedes, and everyone would congratulate him on being so blessed. Where I would be erased from the narrative, completely reduced to nothing more than a forgotten footnote in the Sterling family success story. Laura had a different plan. On Saturday afternoon, I got a call from my mother. When I saw her name on my phone, I almost didn't answer. But Laura had told me to take it to let her say whatever she wanted and to keep it brief. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" my mother hissed when I answered. The venom in her voice was shocking, even though I should have expected it. Some lawyer sent us papers. A cease and desist letter, a notice of pending litigation. "You're trying to steal Chad's house." "It's not Chad's house," I said calmly. "It's the house I paid for. You took $750,000 from me and gave it to him like it meant nothing. And then you borrowed $150,000 against it to buy him a car and throw a party. That's called fraud, Mum." "You ungrateful little bitch," she spat. "After everything we did for you, raising you, giving you a home." "Giving me a home," I repeated, and I actually laughed. It was a bitter, harsh sound. "Mum, you took my home. You took my life. You took 8 years from me. And you did it while making me feel guilty for not giving more. But that's over now. You'll be getting more papers soon. And by the way, enjoy the party. I hear Chad's new Mercedes is beautiful. Hope it was worth it, because it's going to be repossessed before the warranty runs out." I hung up before she could respond, and I actually felt good for the first time in days. Maybe the first time in years. Uncle Mark had been right. Sometimes the only way to deal with people who see kindness as weakness is to show them you have teeth too. Monday morning came fast. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m, but Laura had arranged something even better. She had gotten the judge to issue a temporary writ of possession effective immediately, and she had coordinated with the local sheriff's department to serve it. The timing was, as she put it, with that predatory smile, perfect. Because the housewarming party was still going on. My parents, in their arrogance, had decided to extend the celebration through the weekend, hosting a Sunday brunch and then an afternoon gathering on Monday. It was according to the invitations that Tiana had secretly sent me, a 2-day extravaganza celebrating Chad's future and their generosity. They had hired caterers, they had rented extra tables and chairs, they had invited everyone they knew, probably 100 people, all there to admire the house and hear the story of how they had sacrificed to give their son this amazing gift. The story that erased me completely. At 2 p.m. on Monday afternoon, I pulled up to the house in a rented Audi A8. Uncle Mark was behind me in his BMW 7 Series. Laura was in the passenger seat of my car, looking like she was about to enjoy the best day of her professional life. And behind us, driving slowly and deliberately, was a sheriff's deputy in an official vehicle. The front yard was full of people. Tables with white linens were set up on the lawn. There was a bartender serving drinks. A small band was playing jazz music. My mother was holding court near the front porch, surrounded by neighbours and relatives, gesturing dramatically as she told some story. My father stood nearby, looking uncomfortable in his suit. And there in the driveway, gleaming in the afternoon sun, was Chad's new Mercedes C-Class, surrounded by his friends who were taking photos and admiring it. We parked right at the curb, blocking the driveway exit. The music faltered. People started to notice. My mother looked over and I watched the blood drain from her face as she recognised me. Then she saw Uncle Mark, then Laura, then the sheriff's deputy. The deputy walked up to the porch with purpose and the crowd parted like water. He was carrying a document in a leather folder and his face was professionally neutral. The music stopped entirely. Every eye was on him as he approached my mother. "Mrs. Veronica Sterling," he said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. His voice cut through the afternoon air like a blade. "I'm here to serve you with a temporary writ of possession. As of this moment, this property has been placed under the control of Ms. Anya Vance pending resolution of a legal claim. All occupancy and activities, including this gathering, must cease immediately." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face went from pale to red to purple in the span of seconds. "This is a mistake," she shrieked. "This is my house. That woman is my daughter and she's trying to destroy us." Laura stepped forward, her heels clicking on the sidewalk as she approached. She was immaculate in a sharp grey suit, carrying a briefcase, every inch the professional. "Ma'am," she said, her voice carrying across the lawn, "I'm Laura Chen, Ms. Vance's attorney. The transfer of this property to your son was challenged based on Ms. Vance's documented financial contributions totaling over $750,000. Furthermore, the home equity line of credit you obtained just days after Ms. Vance's final payment triggered protective clauses in a trust established for her benefit. All transactions related to this property are now frozen." A murmur went through the crowd. People were starting to pull out their phones, filming, taking photos. My father had gone pale and was staring at the ground. Chad had pushed through the crowd and was standing on the porch next to my mother, looking between me and the deputy with growing panic. "This is insane," my mother said, but her voice had lost its force. "She knows this house was always meant to be a family home. She was helping the family." "Helping the family," I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice was. I walked forward and the crowd parted for me too. I stopped at the bottom of the porch steps and looked up at my mother. "For years I helped this family. I gave you every penny I earned. I gave up my 20s so you could maintain your lifestyle and your image. And the moment you didn't need me anymore, you broke my key and told me I wasn't part of the family. You gave my house to him." I pointed at Chad, who flinched. "A house I paid for. And then, not satisfied with stealing $750,000 from me, you took out a loan against it to buy him a Mercedes and throw parties. You turned my sacrifice into your entertainment." That's when Tiana stepped forward from the crowd. My cousin, the quiet one who worked at the bank, the one who had always been kind to me, but never made waves. She looked nervous, but determined. "She's telling the truth," Tiana said loudly. "I work at Pacific Trust Bank. I saw the HELOC application. They borrowed $150,000 2 days after Anya made the final mortgage payment. The loan officer noted it was for vehicle purchase and home improvements." Another murmur from the crowd, this one uglier. People were looking at my parents differently now. The perfect image was cracking. My mother opened her mouth closed. It looked at my father for support. Robert Sterling just stood there, useless as always, unable to meet anyone's eyes. And then, as if on cue, we all heard it. The deep rumble of a diesel engine. A repo truck, massive and black and completely lacking in subtlety, rolled down the street and pulled up to the curb. The driver got out clipboard in hand and walked straight toward the Mercedes. Chad finally found his voice. "What is that? What's happening?" That Laura said pleasantly is the consequence of purchasing a vehicle with fraudulently obtained funds. The HELOC was taken against property that is now in dispute. The creditors have been notified. They've chosen to exercise their right to immediate repossession of secured assets until the matter is resolved. The repo driver was already hooking up the Mercedes. Chad ran toward it, yelling, trying to physically block the truck. "That's my car. That's my graduation present. So step back, the deputy said, moving to intercept Chad. This is illegal repossession. Don't make me arrest you for interference. Chad looked like he was going to cry. He looked at my mother, at my father, desperate for them to do something to fix this, like they always fixed everything for him. But they couldn't. They stood frozen, watching as the Mercedes was lifted onto the repo truck, watching as their perfect party disintegrated into chaos and humiliation. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. And I did partly. But mostly I just felt tired and sad. Sad for the years I had lost. Sad for the family I thought I had. Sad for the naive girl I had been who thought love and sacrifice were the same thing. My mother finally looked at me, and for the first time I saw something other than cold dismissal in her eyes. I saw fear. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "I want what I paid for," I said simply. "I want the life I gave up for you. I want justice. You and Dad have 48 hours to vacate the property before the locks are changed. The deputy is here to ensure you understand this is not a negotiation. This is a court order." "But where will we go?" My father finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," I said, and I meant it. "And honestly, I don't care. You never cared where I would go when you broke my key and threw me out. You never cared about what I sacrificed. You only cared about what I could give you. So figure it out. Be resourceful. Do what you've been telling me to do my entire life and take responsibility for yourselves." I turned and walked back to my car. Uncle Mark and Laura followed. Behind us, the party was completely destroyed. Guests were leaving, muttering to each other, casting disgusted looks at my parents. The band was packing up. The caterers were bewildered. And my mother and father and brother stood there on the porch, finally understanding that actions have consequences. The legal battle took another month, but it was never really in doubt. Laura was a shark, and she had everything documented. The court reviewed my 8 years of payments, the protective trust that Uncle Mark had established, and the HELOC that my parents had taken out in what the judge called clear bad faith. The summary judgment came down heavily in my favour. The house was mine legally and completely. The trust structure that Uncle Mark had created meant that my parents' claim of it being a gift was invalid. I had made those payments with the reasonable expectation of a share in the property, and they had violated that by both excluding me and then leveraging the equity. But here's the thing, I didn't want the house. I didn't want to live in that building that represented years of manipulation and false hope. So I sold it. The market in that area was hot, and within 2 weeks I had a cash offer for $950,000. After closing costs and paying off the HELOC that was still attached to the property, I walked away with nearly $780,000. More than I had put in, actually, thanks to the appreciation I had created by keeping the house out of foreclosure all those years. It felt like the universe giving me back interest on my pain. I put the money into a diversified investment portfolio. I hired a financial advisor who worked for me, not for my family. I bought myself a modest but beautiful condo in the city, a place that was mine and mine alone. I got a therapist and started unpacking years of emotional manipulation and codependency. And I started building the life I should have had at 22. My parents ended up in a rental apartment in a much less prestigious neighbourhood. The place was small, cramped, nothing like the suburban palace they had lorded over for so many years. They had to downsize everything, sell off furniture, admit to their social circle that they had fallen from grace. The whispers and gossip followed them. Everyone knew what they had done, how they had exploited their daughter and then tried to erase her. Chad had to get a real job for the first time in his life. Without the cushion of living at home rent-free, without handouts from parents who no longer had anything to give, he ended up working night shifts at a warehouse an hour away. The golden child discovered what it meant to actually work for a living. I heard through the family grapevine that he was still bitter, still complaining about how unfair it all was, still unable to comprehend that he had been complicit in my exploitation. As for my relationship with them, there isn't one. They tried to reach out a few times in the beginning, my mother calling with a mix of apologies and accusations, my father sending awkward emails that tried to minimize what they had done. But I was done. I had given them 8 years of my life, and they had shown me exactly how much that meant to them. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt, and honestly, I didn't want to rebuild them. Uncle Mark became more of a parent to me than my actual parents had ever been. He checked in on me regularly, took me to dinner, celebrated my victories, and supported me through the hard days when the grief of losing my family would hit me unexpectedly. He told me he was proud of me, not for what I could give him, but for who I was. It was the first time I could remember someone in my family saying that. 3 months after the house sale, I was having coffee with Tiana, my cousin who had spoken up at the party. She had been ostracised by some family members for betraying Veronica and Robert, but she told me she didn't regret it. Someone needed to tell the truth, she said. I'm just sorry I didn't speak up sooner. We were sitting in a cafe in Manhattan watching people rush by on the street, and she asked me how I was doing, really doing, not just the surface answer. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I'm not the same person I was, I finally said. That girl who gave everything away because she thought it would make people love her, she's gone. And I'm not sorry about that. I'm angrier now, more guarded. But I'm also more honest with myself. I know what I'm worth. I know that my value isn't measured by what I can sacrifice for others. And I know that the people who really love you don't ask you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. Tiana nodded slowly. She squeezed my hand across the table. You did the right thing, she said. Even if it hurt, even if it cost you, you chose yourself. A lot of people never do that. She was right. For 29 years I had been taught that choosing myself was selfish, that family came first, that sacrifice was the highest form of love. It took having my heart broken by the people who were supposed to love me most to realise that was a lie. Sacrifice without reciprocity isn't love, it's exploitation dressed up in pretty words. And the moment you stop being useful to people who only value you for what you provide, they'll discard you without a second thought. So I didn't just take back my house, I took back my life, I took back my future. I took back my right to exist as something more than a walking ATM for people who saw kindness as weakness. And I used their betrayal, their greed, their complete lack of respect for me, and I turned it into freedom, into independence, into a net worth that was mine, built on my terms, untouchable by people who thought they could use me forever. That broken key my mother gave me, I kept it. I have it in a small frame on my desk now, a reminder of what I walked away from and what I walked toward. Every time I see it, I remember the girl standing in that driveway holding a box and crying in a parking lot. And I'm grateful to her for finding the strength to say enough, for finding the courage to fight back, for choosing herself when no one else would. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, if I miss my family, if I wish things had turned out differently. The answer is complicated. I regret the years I lost. I regret that I had a family who saw me as a resource instead of a person. I regret that I was so desperate for their love that I let them take everything from me. But do I regret standing up for myself? Do I regret claiming what was mine? Do I regret walking away from people who would have bled me dry if I had let them? Not for a single second. I'm 30 years old now, and I'm just starting the life I should have had 8 years ago. But this time I'm doing it on my own terms, with clear boundaries and a deep understanding of my own worth. I have friends who love me for who I am, not what I can give them. I have a career I'm passionate about. I have savings and investments and a future that belongs only to me. And I have the knowledge that I'm capable of fighting for myself even when it's terrifying, even when it costs me everything I thought I had. They thought they could use me and discard me. They thought I would just disappear quietly, grateful for whatever crumbs of recognition they tossed my way. They were wrong. I didn't just disappear. I took everything they thought was theirs and showed them it had always been mine. I turned their betrayal into my freedom. And that's the revenge that lasts. Not just getting even, but getting ahead, getting out, and getting the life they tried to steal from me. So here's what I want to leave you with. If you're in a situation where you're giving everything and getting nothing back, where your kindness is being exploited and your love is being weaponized against you, you are not trapped. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. It's not selfish to choose yourself. It's not cruel to establish boundaries. It's not wrong to walk away from people who only see you as a resource. You deserve more than being someone's safety net while they cut the rope. You deserve more than sacrificing your future for people who won't even acknowledge your present. And you deserve to build a life that's yours, not one that exists solely to service the dreams and comfort of people who will never appreciate what you've done. I didn't just take back my house, I took back my dignity, my power, and my future. And if you're reading this, wondering if you can do the same, the answer is yes. Yes, you can. It won't be easy, it will hurt. You might lose people you thought you loved, but what you'll gain is something far more valuable. You'll gain yourself. And that, I promise you, is worth everything. So what about you? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between keeping the peace and reclaiming your power? What would you have done in my shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your story matters and I want to hear it. And if this resonated with you, if you've been that person giving and giving until there's nothing left, hit that like button and subscribe. Because you deserve to hear that you're not alone, that your worth isn't measured by what you can sacrifice, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you're not selfish for wanting more, you're human, and you deserve a life that's yours.